welcome back. We had our first snow here in Pennsylvania, and that has me thinking a little bit more about broth and stock and soup. And so today, that's what I'm doing, because we just used our last bone broth out of the freezer, and I need to make some more. I like to do this in large batches, very large batches, so that way I have a lot to pull from when I need it. Now I freeze it. You can absolutely can it or pressure can it. I just prefer to freeze it. So I have a 24 quart large stock pot that I just got this year. It was a gift, just a gift to me for my kitchen, because it comes in handy when I make bone broth or chicken stock. The difference between bone broth and a meat stock is that bone broth uses essentially just the bones. There's very little meat left on it. So if you were to cook a chicken and you have the bones left, you can use those and make a bone broth from your chicken bones. Now there's not a whole lot of collagen in chicken bones. It's gonna be more for flavor and a lighter flavor to make soups or a roux, whereas bone broth made from beef bones have a lot more marrow in them, especially if you use those big marrow bones. You can use any of the bones from, beef, if you get beef bones, but really you want to use one or two of those big marrow bones, because they have that marrow inside that's going to cook out and add that collagen and all those nutrient-dense vitamins, minerals, fats that your body needs, and fuel for your body. So I'm going to do a combination of both today, because I just want a really rich broth or stock. I'm not really caught up in the whole terms of bone broth and meat stock. I use them interchangeably, and in the wintertime, we love to use them as a snack. And so at 10 o'clock in the morning, or even for breakfast, I'll ask the girls, do you want bone broth and some sourdough bread, or do you want eggs and sourdough bread? And I feel like they've been really worn out on eggs, and so they're done with eggs. So we've been drinking a lot of bone broth in the morning, or stock or meat stock. I'm just gonna call it broth, okay? We've been drinking a lot of broth in the morning, and with a side of sourdough bread. Sometimes we don't have the sourdough bread, sometimes we don't, but we're sipping on that. We use it as a snack as well. So 10 o'clock in the morning, if the girls are hungry, I will warm up some broth on the stove and we sip on that. I really prefer doing that than drinking another cup of coffee, or having a glass of, a cup of tea. It really fills me up. It fills my girls up because it's so nutrient dense. And then we'll pull it out of the freezer too, and I'll use it for soups and stews and casseroles as well. So that's why I always like to have it on hand in the wintertime. This is a really, really great skill to learn, a great kitchen skill to learn if you are taking root in 2022. So I'm gonna grab my bones, because I do something a little bit different. I used to not do this, but it adds a lot of depth of flavor. So what I do before I put my bones in my pot, I take them out and I lay them on a baking tray. I give them a good sprinkle of salt and pepper, and then I roast them. I find that roasting them, like I said, adds a lot more flavor to the bone broth. The first time I made bone broth, I lie. The first time that Brooke made bone broth, he took all the bones we had from not all of them, but a large amount of bones from the beef that we had butchered from my sister and brother-in-law, stuffed them all in a crock pot, filled it with water. It was more bones than it was water. And he left it cook for 3 days, and the house stank so bad because it just smelled like fat. It's what it does. If you don't roast the bones, if you don't add onions and celery and carrots and flavors, it's just going to taste like water, like fatty water. That's really what it's going to taste like. So you really want to add all the flavor to it by roasting these bones, and then I'll meet you back here when these bones are roasted, and we're going to put them in the pot with a rooster. One of those roosters that we butchered way back in, was that the summertime? I think it was summer, when they were going crazy all over our farm. We butchered a bunch of roosters, and we're using them for stew birds or for soup birds. I have some chicken feet here as well because it adds some more collagen to it. Scapes, parsley, we're gonna add some flavor along with these bones. Okay, I'm also gonna add this soup bone. It has a lot more meat on it. That's why it's called a soup bone if you get it from the butcher. That's why this is really not going to be a bone broth that I'm making. It's definitely more of a stock, a meat stock. And if you're looking for bones from a butcher, go ahead and ask a butcher if they get any grass-fed beef through their facility. These are all roasted up, and I'm just going to add them to my 24-quart stock pot. If you don't want to make bone broth into this big of a batch, you absolutely don't have to. You can use a smaller stock pot. I think this one is 12 quart. This is a 12 quart. If you only have like 2 beef bones and you're just making a small batch, you can absolutely do that. We go through it really fast, so I like to make a huge batch at one time. Then I only have to make it once every month, every other month. So that's what I like to do. I like to just make large batches of everything. So I'm going to put these in my stock pot. And I'm also going to put the drippings in too. And then this big soup bone, I'll probably, once it's all cooked down, I'm probably gonna pick all that meat off and use it and eat it, because there's a lot of meat on there and I don't want it to go to waste. All right. Now, like I said, I'm doing beef and chicken together because I like the blended flavor of it. You can do one or the other. It's up to you. All right, so I have one of those roosters that we butchered, and we hand plucked these, so there's still some feathers on here. It's not pretty. Prior to or after we did this, we did get a plucker, and it saved us so much time, and the birds came out so much nicer. So I'm gonna put this rooster in there. There is not a lot of meat on a rooster. These are primarily used for stock, so that's what I'm doing. There may be a little bit of meat on there when I pull it out. I'll probably take it off. Maybe I'll just add it to the, I don't know what I'll do, but we'll probably eat a little bit of meat that's on there. I don't like to let that go to waste. And then chicken feet. I know you may be grossing out right now, but these add so much flavor to your stock, to your bone broth, and they add a lot more jiggle too. You know that you have made really good bone broth when it jiggles, or stock. Usually stock doesn't jiggle as much, but the bone broth does, because again, it has those marrow bones in there that have a lot more of that collagen, obviously the marrow, and that's gonna come out and it's gonna make it really thick and dense. And when it cools, it's just gonna be like Jell-O. So the chicken feet will add that element to this too, and then some more flavor. So I had about, I didn't even count, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had about 6 small beef bones, and then that one big marrow soup bone. So about 8 bones, a rooster, some feet in this big stock pot. Now I'm gonna add some flavor, because remember, if you don't add the flavor, if you don't add salt, it's gonna taste really bland. And if you don't add vegetables and all those really good flavoring vegetables like onions and celery and herbs, your broth is going to taste really, really bland. And so if you've tried making this before and you're like, this is really gross and it's bland, ask yourself, did you add the flavor? So I'm going to get rid of this mess. Okay, so every year I save our garlic scapes. Those are the seed head of the garlic, and those usually form around June. I cut those off, and then all the energy goes down into the garlic bulb so that the garlic bulb grows bigger. But those scapes you can save, just that top part where it curls. I freeze them and I just use them for stock, just like this. So I'm gonna add a handful of those. If you don't have that, you can just add maybe a bulb of garlic. I don't even like peel it. I chop the top off and throw it in, as you're gonna see with my onions too. And Gracie's behind me here making donuts because it is first snow, and we always make either donuts or soft pretzels on the first snow day. So we all agreed unanimously, donuts it is. So I don't even take the skin off my onion. You don't have to do that to your garlic either. I just quarter this. I'm gonna do 2 big onions in here. So you're gonna strain all this out anyway, so that's why I never really take the skin off. It adds good color, it adds some more depth of flavor. And then celery, carrots would be good too if you get carrots. Ours are all under snow right now up in the garden. We never harvested them, and we were just going up and digging them up as we needed them. I have like 4 stalks of celery with the leaves on. The leaves really give it a good flavor as well. In the fall when I make this, I will go and just pick a bunch of herbs in my garden, sage and rosemary and thyme. I don't have access to that now, so I'm just gonna use some fresh parsley that I got at the grocery store. I had it for another meal I was making. And I'm gonna grab some herbs de Provence, because that's usually my go-to for seasoning anything in wintertime. I'll add that, and I'm gonna fill this up with some water. And yeah, that's it. That's how super easy it is, guys. So simple. I never really learned to make stock or bone broth. It just was something that our family did. Like if my grandma, my Nana, would see anyone throwing a chicken carcass away or ham bones away after, a big family meal.
Ham would be really good.
Ham would be good. She would have your hide. Why are you throwing that away? Because, after a big family get together or family dinner or holiday dinner, you can stretch that meal so much further than just the leftovers, because cooking down all those bones is going to give you the most flavorful meal, the most flavorful broth. So that's just what we did. And so whether it is stock, like a meat stock, or it's a legit bone broth where you're using just roasted bones, it's going to be good. It's going to add some, so much value to your health, and it's going to give you something to sip on these cold days instead of coffee that makes you all crazy and jittery, or tea that it's nice, but sometimes you just need some density, you need some flavor, you need something that's going to hold you over, or especially your kids. I just know with homeschooling that my kids are hungry all the time. I think because it's accessible, like food is accessible, and so we just sip on broth a lot. And then it's something easy to grab. You don't have to run to the store if you need, some kind of stock for a recipe. You have it on hand. Like I said, you can pressure can this if you want to. I just freeze it, and I'm gonna show you how to do that. So I'm gonna put this on the stove. I'm gonna fill this up, I'm gonna put this on the stove, and let this simmer the rest of the day today, and then all day tomorrow. So what I do is I let it simmer. I bring it up to a boil, I let it simmer until I go to bed, and I turn it off when I go to bed, and then I turn it back on first thing in the morning, and it's usually still super, super hot. So you don't want to put it in the fridge when it's really, really hot, because that could spoil your broth, because what happens is it all starts to cool, and then the heat is like captured in the center. That's how my grandma explained it to me. And she often reminds me, don't put your broth away when it's too hot. Remember to cool it down really good. So I just leave it on the stove. I might actually put it on the wood stove tonight, put it on top of the wood stove and just let it simmer that way so that it's still going all night long. So when you're doing bone broth, essentially you really want to let that simmer for a good 24-48 hours, because you want to get all of that marrow, all the nutrients out of those bones. That's what really counts. When you're doing a chicken stock or chicken broth, it doesn't have to simmer that long. I would say maybe 12 hours is good for chicken. So I'm doing both chicken and beef. So I'm just gonna let this puppy sit and simmer. The longer it simmers, the more nutrients that are pulled out of those bones and the meat, and the better it is for you, the more flavor it's gonna have. And then I'm gonna cool it down real good and then strain it off. So I'll be back tomorrow to show you how we do that, because with this pot this big, it can get kind of tricky. Oh, and one more thing that I usually do add to this is apple cider vinegar. Again, apple cider vinegar, maybe a 1/4 cup to a size like this. If you're just doing a smaller stock pot, 2 tablespoons, maybe a little less, but that just helps, again, soften the bones, pull out the nutrients. Right? See you guys tomorrow. Welcome back. We're on day 2 of this broth simmering on the stove. It smells so good in here, and I'm gonna have a little bit because I just came in from sledding. The snow is almost gone, so we were taking full advantage of all that snow that's out there. It wasn't a lot, but just maybe a couple inches, and having some fun and relishing in this season. So let me show you how I jar this up. There's 2 methods that you can do. If you have a big batch like this, then go ahead and grab just your mason jars and a funnel with a strainer on the bottom. Mine, if you can see mine, I already started straining some of it off, but this one's old-fashioned. I don't even know where, I think it was my great-grandmother's, my grandmother's, I'm not sure, but we absolutely love this funnel. So when you're straining your hot liquid into a mason jar, into glass, you want to make sure that you temper it. So I did run this through some hot water. I just kind of filled these up with hot water. You can soak your jars in hot water, or some people put them in the microwave. You can put them in the oven. However you want to temper that glass is up to you. I usually just run some hot water over my jars or let them soak in hot water in the sink. So I'm going to simply stir this up. The fat comes to the top. And so I'm going to stir it quite often before I ladle it in my jar. Okay. And I like having that strainer, the funnel with the strainer, so that way if any herbs or fat or vegetables get through there, they're not going to go through into the broth. So let me show you this one here that I already have done. So right here, I didn't fill it too full, because if you are freezing, you don't want to fill it super full. You want to leave a good 2-inch headspace for expansion. And on newer mason jars, I think they actually have a line that says freeze line at the top, so you can go by that. But simply fill that, leave a 2-inch headspace, and then leave it out on the counter to cool to room temperature. Put the lid on and then put it in your refrigerator. So this is the key to have less jars breaking in your freezer. I always get that question, how do you freeze in glass jars without the glass jars breaking? It's all about tempering the glass. So you wanna leave this cool on the counter, put the lid on, put it in your refrigerator. And then before transferring it to the freezer, leave it in the refrigerator for a good 24 hours. Then you can move it to the freezer, and then you're gonna have less chance of that glass breaking. All right, so I'm gonna jar these up. The second thing you can do, if you have a smaller batch, if you didn't make a large batch like I did here, and you just make a smaller pot of broth, you can simply take a colander, just like this, put it in a big bowl, and then pour that pot and everything in it right into that colander. Lift the colander up, let it strain, and you'll have that beautiful golden liquid broth. Everything else goes to the chicken or on the compost pile, slop pile, wherever you put all your slop. So chickens will love that. I know you may say, oh, that's chicken meat though. They are carnivorous, they will eat anything. So they will love this. All right, I hope you stay well, be well, let this broth nourish you. Let me know in the comments if you made chicken broth or if you made bone broth or a meat stock, and how did it turn out? Remember, I did a combination, but you can do whatever you want. The method is the same. See you next time.